I thank you, first of all, for your willingness and interest to share in this important area, your energy, your ideas, your insights, as it's clearly becoming an important area of for people, policy, and practice. For those of you who may be new to the Pallium Project, it really exists as a community of individuals, of teams, of organizations who are committed and actively involved in improving access to hospice palliative care and making sure that care is available in the right place, at the right time, and by the right providers. And the focus is increasing the quality of living and dying, or perhaps more directly put, increasing the quality of living while dying for many people. And so we're focused on making tangible and consistent progress towards the systems that are necessary for realizing the vision of quality end-of-life care in Canada. And that's particularly so now in light of the changes in our population. And I appreciate at this point that I'm really reading you your own mail, so I'm going to leave that for you to touch on later. Over the last 4 years that the project has been active, it's proceeded in its activities from a population health orientation. Now, what does that mean? We've always been interested in how the process of moving towards an expected death impacts the total circle of people around the person who is living while dying. And it is in this population health context that we're concerned about the quality of life and the personal health impact that dying has on people around the person who is living while dying. We see around us each day that the nature of dying is changing. And for those of you who have heard me talk a little bit about this area as I learn more about it, I've taken some notes from, not this morning, but some of my mental cues and some of my thinking and developing my thinking around this from Joanne Lynn, and I'll circulate this book today. And in some of you who know of Joanne Lynn know that she's a prominent American medical educator, advocate, and she's a RAND scientist, and she's president of Americans for Better Care of the Dying. And this year, actually I guess it was last year now, we're in 2005, the Millbank Memorial Fund published a work of hers called Sick to Death and Not Going to Take It Anymore, Reforming Healthcare for the Last Years of Life. And it's a very interesting map, and it very much, aside from some of the American system issues and the American data, I think there's, you can sort of say, insert Canada here. So it's a resource I would encourage you to think about. We see around us each day that the nature of dying is changing. And within a few generations, we have shifted, particularly in industrialized nations, from a time when life was short, serious illness associated with infectious disease and disabilities were common, and dying was relatively quick. I would like to suggest to you that we've moved into the age of what I've, as shorthand, started to call the long death, more and more. A time when many people diagnosed with a progressive chronic illness, which is clearly life-limiting, can run a course which extends months or even years. And we're starting to understand more and more what's been called the consequences of caregiving. And this morning, Lori will talk with us about some work that has been done by a group called the Research in Aging Policies and Practice Group, based at the University of Alberta. Caregiving for progressive chronic illness impacts the ability of family and friends to provide quality care over the long run. We know that. And disturbingly, it also profoundly impacts the health status and personal, financial, and other stability of caregivers. And often the nature of the relationship among the dying family member and family members. And we'll, I think, discuss that in more detail based on your on-the-ground experiences today. I think the challenges of the long death are many, and they expose the fragile underbelly of our current systems, our networks of health and human services systems and community supports. I think the other thing that's important to realize and why we're coming together today in part is that the issues are many, and they're complex, and they're interwoven. And they're going to require some time and dialogue to understand and navigate. I think what I'd like to suggest to you today, and first of all, I thank you for accepting the opportunity to come here. You have a unique opportunity within a facilitated environment with a very, very good and experienced facilitator to make a tangible step on that journey. It's clearly not an expectation of this workshop today that will solve all the problems associated with family caregiving and the long death. That would be unrealistic and setting the bar too high. But I think what's a realistic and meaningful step is to move towards the following, and I would ask you at this point to refer to the agenda that Andrea handed out to you if you didn't bring a printed copy of it. Okay, so if I could summarize that, what we'd like to try to achieve today is a better understanding of the current context, the issues, and mapping of prospective resources that we can mobilize to better understand longer-term family caregiving, particularly where there's an expected death. That we have an opportunity to dialogue with each other about our respective roles, relationships, and the prospective resources that we can bring to bear on this. And that we see if there is a will and a commitment to mobilize towards some type of tangible action that will do a couple of things. One is to increase the quality and the quantity of teaching and learning resources that are available in this area for family caregivers, for volunteers, and for paid providers. And the other thing I'd like to suggest today is I would like to urge some caution and suggest some ground rules. What I have come to learn in this country is that the language associated with family caregiving can be divisive. And I'll ask Sharon Baxter to briefly address that when she does her national snapshot. I think what we want to understand is that today in this context we will use the language of family caregiver or family friend within the definition of the Canadian Hospice Palliative Care norms and principles, which provides a broad relational definition of family. So to summarize, family is who the patient says the family is, as a working definition. I expect that we'll be very engaged and impassioned today, and I ask that you seek to understand as well as to be understood. And I also encourage you to remain in a position of curiosity rather than judgment at times as we explore each other's abilities, responsibilities, and potential contributions.